The beam in one's own eye. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 5. Dear beloved saints, greetings. Today we will reflect on the words of Jesus recorded in Matthew chapter 7. When we listen to the words of Jesus, there is something we must first remember. The Jesus sayings are the words that came from the very mouth of Jesus. And these words of Jesus are written in the 4 Gospels. Nowhere else in the 66 books of the Bible do we find the direct words of Jesus recorded. That is why the Gospels are the very core, the 4 pillars of faith. This is something we must not overlook. May this be a precious time for you today, to receive grace through the words of Jesus. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Jesus says, do not judge, so that you will not be judged. Yet when we see the faults of others, we often judge them. In those days, the standard of judgment was the law of the Old Testament. But instead of using the law to examine themselves, people used it to look at others. Other people's faults appeared clearer than their own. So what did Jesus say? Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? He says, why do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but fail to notice the beam in your own? Surely, each person knows their own state best. Jesus commands us. First, remove the beam from your own eye. Between a speck and a beam, which is greater? Of course, the beam. And yet, people see another speck as bigger than the beam within themselves. Jesus teaches us, remove the beam in yourself first. This beam may represent one's personal faults, but for the Jews, the beam was in fact the Old Testament law itself. Jesus was calling them to remove that burden. But removing the beam within oneself is never an easy task. Only after taking the beam out of your own eye can you help your brother with the speck in his. Becoming a true disciple of Jesus is the process of renewing oneself through these very words. For the kingdom of God to be realized on this earth, it must not be a world of criticism and judgment, but a world of blessing, forgiveness, and love. Judgment leads only to quarrels. It gives birth to division. However, we must remember that criticism of public institutions is necessary. There is a difference between judging an individual and correcting a public body. The church is not an individual. It is a public institution. If the church goes astray, it must be held accountable. If wrongs are covered up, that church is no different from a dead church. There are churches that hand leadership down to their sons. There are also churches that increase their wealth through land speculation. Such churches are rightly subject to criticism. What is wrong must be spoken of as wrong. Even when Jesus declared woe to the scribes and Pharisees, he was not condemning a single individual, but the entire system of the law to which they belonged. This is something we must understand correctly. Through today's passage, we must reflect. What is the beam in us? Formalistic faith, outward religiosity. These must be removed. Such things are only for show before others. Instead, we must be born anew through the words of Jesus. We must strive to understand his words rightly. This is all I will share with you today. May peace always be with you. Thank you.